This is our very first brand new Class Dojo District Leader event series featuring education speakers and experts on topics that you care about. I'm excited to host these live virtual trainings and then get to share a resource with you they can bring back to your schools and really help you shine as a leader and support the many schools that you serve. We're kicking off today with a leadership guide to cybersecurity, how to fortify your district, featuring Melissa Tebbenkamp, privacy and technology leadership consultant and former CIO. But before I bring on Melissa, I'm excited to share a few updates this year that will support you and your community from our Class Dojo team. I'm excited to share the Class Dojo, the #1 communication app chosen by K-12 teachers, is launching district level oversight and controls. That means one place to communicate and connect with your entire district from pre-K all the way through to high school. 96% of schools who use Class Dojo see more family engagement. It's already loved by your teachers and family communities and over 50 million others worldwide. And it's 100% free for schools, districts. We believe money should be spent on teachers and education, not on software. We partner with districts to build stronger connections between families, teachers, and school leaders with unparalleled security and oversight. That means we never share your information. We are fully certified with iKeepSafe, and your information is stored securely. You'll get single sign-on, school-wide records, district-wide access for admins, and of course, consistent privacy, safety, and security across your entire district. We're happy to answer any questions you might have for us at the end of our call today, or you can visit classdojo.com/privacy and security to learn more. And you can also visit classdojo.com/districts to book a one-on-one call with our team if interested. But that's not the reason you're here today. I'm super excited to introduce you, Melissa. She's a privacy and technology leadership consultant and former CIO, highly qualified in adult learning, data governance, cybersecurity, and enterprise technology leadership, and has earned a national reputation for her expertise. She has been invited to speak by several national organizations. She's contributed to nationally published white papers and articles. As a certified teacher in Missouri with a master's in education technology and over 16 years of experience as a school CIO, Melissa brings a unique skill set that combines understanding of complex networks, educational philosophy, and leadership. And so she's the perfect person for us to have join us today. I'm going to stop sharing and let her join us and take on over. Welcome, Melissa.
Thank you. Thank you. I love being here. Okay, give me just 1 second and you should see my slides. We are good to go. Thank you all for joining us. I promise. I believe we said we are content rich today. Hopefully, if nothing else, by the time our hour is up, and I will talk for about 30 minutes and leave time for questions and some discussion. But by the time our, my slides are up, I'm hoping that you have at least one takeaway that you can apply, as soon as this afternoon or when you get back from your winter break, whenever that is that you're going to get started on your cybersecurity work. And we're going to really stop today to take a global look at leadership and cybersecurity and how we can get going and get momentum in your district. I often hear from colleagues that there are challenges out there that most leadership individuals don't understand when it comes to cybersecurity, data privacy, and really building that program that you need. So we're going to start with just level setting some definitions, some concepts, and then we'll dig into how do we get going. So cybersecurity is really, in simple terms, the process of protecting your systems, your data, from unauthorized access or attack. So we hear that in multiple different forms. So we have network security, cloud, physical, but we also have security of the human. We know that many of our data breaches or cybersecurity attacks have a human involved in the process. So we also cannot forget when we talk about cybersecurity that human security is a really big part of it. And that piece right there, the fact that our humans are such a tremendous part of cybersecurity is why cybersecurity is not a technology function. And for those who are on with us today or might be listening to the recording, many of you might say, I try to say that all the time, that it's not a technology function, that it requires so much more than just technology. And I tell superintendents and board members that if you feel like your technology department has it when it comes to cybersecurity, and that's where you end your conversation, then you've already lost the game. Because successful data security and cybersecurity is only achieved through a culture of the leadership and all of the stakeholders within the organization and with a focus around trusted data. And we're going to talk a little bit about that to hopefully give you some language to start moving that needle to getting that culture and the entire stakeholder buy-in. We're going to talk about data governance instead of changing that language from cybersecurity, which sounds, by the way, such a technology abstract, really, really hard to do. The high level technicians are running this type of concept of I will never understand it. That is not my job, to a framework that school leadership understands. And that is data governance. And this is built on our policies, practices, and procedures. Some we have, maybe some we need to develop, but it focuses on the people, which guess what? In education, we already do that. So it takes the effort of cybersecurity and data governance and starts putting it into a framework that we understand as district leadership, as instructional leaders, so that we can make this very abstract, highly technical concept something that is more manageable within a framework we already know. And we do that by establishing a culture of what I like to call trusted data. When we get to the heart of what we need as an organization, we know that education runs off of data. We use data for operations, but we also use data for our students to help guide instruction, to monitor achievement. So much of what we do is built around the data that we collect. And if our data can't be trusted to be accurate, so to have integrity, to know that those who are entering data are taking care of that data and that they're making sure that it's entered in accurately and kept safe, and that we can access it when we need to, and only those who need to have access to it can access it. And if we have that conversation around data and how we need to keep data safe, then we can start building out from there about how do we create this culture that keeps our data safe and trusted by our stakeholders, our parents, our students, our teachers, our administrators. I always ask my teachers and my administrators, how do you want us to handle your HR data? And then let's start looking at student data the same way and how we want to keep it safe and protected as well. And there's many different pieces. And if we had a lot more time today, I would go into this entire model of a culture of trusted data. But if you look just globally, we have these rings. Other models have overlapping, they're like Venn diagrams, and there's a small little place where all of these different pieces, if they overlap just perfectly, that's what we say is data governance, or what the global organization is responsible for. And instead, I want to look at it as more of rings that all tie in together, and we cannot have one function without the other. We have to know our data exists to protect it. Then we have to have that cybersecurity, data security component, which is where a lot of technology lives. But then we have the privacy piece, which are our humans, our teachers, our staff, our administrators, and what they do with the data and how they protect it. We have that governance piece, which talks about the communication, training, and ownership and investment of the leadership of the district into it. And then we have that culture, which is the people, the processes, and the technology that envelop everything we do around data. And if we can start looking at cybersecurity through this lens of what it takes to keep data safe, because if we have a failure at any part of this, then our data is not secure and it is vulnerable for a breach. And so we need to make sure that we are taking an all-in approach from the cultural aspect of our district. And that's a lot easier said than done. I know I've been there, I've built that culture, I've seen that culture struggle with leadership changes, I've seen that culture rebuild, I've seen it questioned. And the one thing that we always come back to is talking about our truths and what really we are grounded and founded in when we come to our data governance program. And when we end today, I will give you those steps that I took to build and rebuild and address and keep it alive as we go forward. And so many people will say, well, we know cybersecurity is out there, everybody's data is breached. Why does it really matter? And or we'll just deal with it. I hear a lot from my from superintendents, from leadership. That's what we have insurance for, and that's kind of a dangerous place for us to go. We don't want to be reactionary. We don't want to have to count on insurance because there's definitely a human impact to a cybersecurity attack and to a data breach. In fact, now education was the number one target for cybersecurity attacks and the number one target for ransomware. Back in the day, it was banks and then it was healthcare, but now it's education. We are the number one target for these attacks. And we rank the least secure out of 17 industries. So those 17 major verticals, education, we're the least secure. Healthcare wasn't that secure, they got attacked, they got better. Banking wasn't as secure, they got attacked, they got better. We have to get better. We have to shift the focus and not be that low-hanging fruit. So we're the number one target, but we're the least secure. Yet, we don't invest in cybersecurity. District administration did a survey. There's lots of surveys out here that really support this finding that 1 in 5 schools spend less than 1% of their IT budgets on security. And I'm going to let that sink in because this is 1% of their IT budget, not their district budget, their IT budget. And many, many IT budgets are 3 to 4% of the overall district budget. So we're looking at 1% of less than 5% or 3%. And that is such a small amount. When, you know what we do invest in? Security guards. After teachers, we invest more in security guards than any other role. That is incredible considering that 80% of our district budgets, roughly average, at least in my district, 80% was based in salaries. And then we contracted security guards. And we did, this holds true in my district. We spent so much money on security guards, but less than 1% we average in school districts of our IT budget on cybersecurity. But when we look at our parents' perspectives, our parents' fears, and what the reality of a active shooter or a physical security threat, we're showing that there's this disconnect between where we're investing. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't invest in physical security. Please don't take away saying that. I think we don't invest in physical security, but we invest a lot in physical security. Yet our families aren't as worried, 19% of parents are extremely worried about a shooting happening. And we teach and we drill and we talk a lot about physical safety and the threats that are there. But if you look at that compared to surveys around parents' views on student privacy and data breaches, you'll see that our families are more concerned about their students' data being breached and exposed or used inappropriately than they are about a school shooting. But we're not addressing cybersecurity through that lens. Instead, we're having the same old conversation about data privacy and security and tools and highly technical stuff. We spend too little on cybersecurity, and our threats are becoming more and more sophisticated. We don't know how to respond to them. We have poor strategies globally across the organizations. We are ranked least secure of all of the industries. And so what my hope is that we shift this conversation and we start talking about our risks and we start talking about them in real terms that leadership can understand so that we can invest appropriately in cybersecurity, so we can shift that perspective. And really, you know what we can do? We can parallel it with physical security because that is something that we know in education and we invest in deeply. So we don't have to compete against physical security. We just have to learn from what's working within that realm of investment and that realm of security, because that is just as important as keeping our kids safe online. We have a lot of risks. Primarily in education, we see a lot of phishing emails. They're trying to get your credentials so they can log in as you. They might do W-2 phishing requests. That's what hits the news the most because it's really hard to hide that one. It's publicly known when all of your employees get hit by that. But there are these credential thefts and trying to do the direct deposit and ACH changes, and people are still falling for these gift card scams. Still happening as much as we talk about them. But we also have DDoS attacks, and that was one of the questions at the beginning. If you guys joined a little bit early and you saw the trivia there, it's cheap for like under $100. If I don't want to take my test, I can make your life miserable. Then we have ransomware. Ransomware is getting a little scarier because they're changing, because we're not paying. They're exfiltrating our data. They're contacting our stakeholders. They're emailing parents because they have access to data. Like, that landscape is definitely changing on the ransomware front. But we also have insider issues. I had a local school district that had one of their biggest data breaches was an insider threat. It was a disgruntled employee. And then we always have the accidental ones. One of my biggest data breaches in my district wasn't a cybersecurity risk. It was an internal actor accidentally emailed the wrong group a bunch of sensitive information. When we look at cyber attacks, we're not only compromising confidential information, but it does disrupt classroom instruction, administrative functions. It is stealing money from your taxpayers that could be used other places. It is causing distrust in your community. Talk about those long-term effects of not being able to pass your next funding initiative because your taxpayers don't trust what you're doing with your finances or don't trust what you're doing in your district. And it really has a long-term impact on those who are affected. We don't know what they're doing with all of the data they're taking from us, but we know it can't be good. And what's going to happen to that kid that's in high school right now when they go out to to find a career, and all of that information is now out there and available on the dark web, that may prevent them from getting a job or may prevent them from getting admitted into a prestigious school. We don't know what the potential impact is of these data breaches. So I'm going to start giving you guys some lists, and then we have some questions. So I want to save room for those questions and for the discussion afterwards. So I'm trying to get through these pretty quick for you. But so our 5 things. So we're going to talk about risk, right? And what are those 5 things you can do to mitigate most of these risks? Monitor your network. When we do cybersecurity evaluations for schools, one of the biggest questions I ask them is, do you know what normal looks like? Because if you don't know what normal looks like, how do you know when something's going wrong? How do you know when there's just this little bit of uptick and traffic going out because somebody is siphoning off data? That's how you find out, is because you know what normal looks like and you know what those servers should and shouldn't be doing. And then as soon as you get that uptick, you can get a trigger and you can stop something from happening. So you need to monitor your network, not just respond to alerts. We need to manage access. You should restrict your privileged accounts, have MFA, 2-factor, multi-factor, whatever term you're calling in and whatever tools you're using, restrict access. Those malware programs that execute on a device, if it doesn't have permission to execute, it's not going to be able to do anything. So if we can restrict access, we're making them be smarter. We're making them work harder. Like, let's take out that easy in and not allow them that elevated access. There are a couple different approaches of how you manage privileged accounts. One is to make sure all privileged accounts have MFA. That's highly, highly recommended no matter which approach you go, but that they reset their passwords periodically and that there's additional checks. Like you're doing MFA every time you log in and you're resetting your password frequently and you're managing it that way. Another option is to have all of your privileged accounts separate from your normal use accounts so that as the CIO, when I'm logged onto my computer, I'm a regular user. If somehow somebody happens to get me, I click on that bad link, it doesn't have any access to do anything. If my account does, then anytime that executable runs or an executable runs, it needs to have MFA to do any type of administrative access. Make sure you're backing up your data. We're getting better at this, which is why a lot of attackers and criminals, cyber criminals, are changing their approach with us, because back in the day, we used to not have backups as secure. We used to not be able to restore from backups and recover from a ransomware attack. So we would pay the ransom to get our data back. As we get better at backing up, we don't want to pay the ransom because we don't need to, because we'll just restore and move on, because we have air gapped backups that are encrypted. They can't be changed. So they're not going to be able to do anything. We're going to be able to, restore that backup in a controlled environment, and you reduce any risk of them re-triggering that attack on us. And we're testing those to make sure that they work. So because we're getting better at this, and if you're not doing that, you should be testing, which is really, really scary. But I always say, if you don't test your backups, you don't have a backup. You have a hope. You have a dream. You got your fingers crossed, but you don't know if it'll really work. But as we do that, then they get more sophisticated. As we move up that maturity scale, their attacks get more sophisticated on us. You should vet your vendors. So I believe you have links coming into chat as I'm talking, because this team is absolutely on top of it. And there's that K-12 CVAT from COSN, which is absolutely awesome. They took the HECVAT, which is a higher education CVAT, which is a cybersecurity vendor assessment tool, and they shrunk it down a little bit. They made it a little bit more manageable for K-12, a little bit more applicable for K-12, and they've released that to help you evaluate the cybersecurity and data security practices of our vendors. It's great. The vendor fills it out once, and then they can send it to everybody who asks for it. But you have to know as a district what you're looking at to know whether or not their answers meet your needs, and whether or not they answer appropriately to what I call my non-negotiables. They can score really high, but have one answer that is like a non-negotiable and they're out. So you need to know what those are for you. And then CISA recently, within the last year-ish, launched the K-12 Secure by Design Pledge, which is absolutely phenomenal. This is the federal approach of trying to help schools down this journey of finding safe tools. There's a small number of vendors who have signed on to it, but they have some great practices in there. So if nothing else, look at the practices that CISA recommends for our vendors, and integrate those into the questions that you're asking your vendors as you're vetting them. And then you create plans and practice your response, just like we do with anything else. If we don't practice, we don't know how to respond. You're going to have response plans, your incident response. If something bad happens, you might just have like a natural disaster response plan that you want to test as well. So you're going to create those plans and you're going to practice them. You're going to figure out where they don't meet all of your needs, and then you're going to refine them. And we do that constant cycle. That's a lot in 5 things. We're going to monitor, we're going to manage our access, make sure our backups are working. We're going to vet those that we're sharing data with, and we're going to know everybody we're sharing data with, because we can't protect what we don't know. And then we're going to create our plans. So once you get those 5 tackled, I'm just joking, that takes a while. So we're going to figure out how to get started. How do we start building momentum? Because some of this you can do in technology, which is why I like to have these 5 things separate. But some of these you need district leadership investment in. So one, you can have the funding, but also, especially with like multi-factor, you have that understanding of why you're implementing these processes or these security measures. So we're going to move to the top 6 to build momentum and make progress in your data governance culture and in your school environment when it comes to cybersecurity. And the first one, if you've done the last 5, then the first one's easy for you. We're going to vet all of our systems. And when I say all of them, that's the ones you have on-prem and the ones that are hosted by your vendors. Make sure you're reading the terms of service and the privacy policies of all of them, including your free resources. Just because it's free doesn't mean that you're not signing a contract. Most of the time you are. That terms of service and that privacy policy usually equates your contract you're signing them. Make sure you're reading your contracts. When they're free or paid, you need to make sure that they're still meeting your compliance and security practices. Just because it's free does not mean that you cannot negotiate terms of a contract. You still can. I did that plenty with free resources, but you need to make sure that you have your federal compliance in check and that they are meeting your data security practices. You still have FERPA that you need to worry about and that you need to ensure compliance with, even if it's free. And sometimes, especially since it's free, because those get to be a little bit harder to rein in. You need to validate need. You know what? I always say data can't be breached if you don't have it. Don't collect things you don't really need. If you can't articulate a need for having that data, just don't collect it. That I may need it later is not a good validation measure. Let's just not collect it then, and then have a process that's workable for your teachers. This is so important because data breaches that involve our data were the most reported type of cybersecurity incident. And in 75% of those cases, it was the security practices of our vendors and our partners that were the root cause of our data breaches. And 75%. And that is tremendous. And if we can mitigate this risk, man, we can get better on that maturity rating immediately. We need to have great contracts in place, and we need to be choosy about who we trust with our data and what they're doing with our data. Which takes us to limiting our data collection. So again, data can't be breached if it doesn't exist. We shouldn't collect it if we don't have a need. We need to delete it when we no longer need it, and this includes our third-party vendors. Sometimes our vendors will ask us to share data with them that we don't really need them to have. My math app does not need to know my student's IEP status because I'm not asking them to report back to me on that. I'm asking them to report back to me how a student is doing on multiplication facts. And so when we look at what is the role and the purpose of this tool and what is the minimum amount of data that they need in order to serve this purpose, then we're on the right track of protecting our information. The delete when it's no longer needed, that is a big challenge that I see as a conversation that will take hold more and more in the coming years. When our students graduate from us and we have all of this data in these systems on a graduated student, do we really need to still have identified data on that student? And oftentimes the answer is no. How do we minimize the data we're retaining on our students that are no longer ours, but still have the historical data we need to make educational decisions for our current students and our future students? We should limit access to our data. Human error leads to data exposure. All of my data breaches that I had in my district over my 16 plus years were because of human error. One, an email, actually several emails that got sent out to the wrong people. One was a paper, not even cybersecurity. Instead of paper going into the shred bin, it was put next to the shred bin because the bin was full and the custodian put it in the trash can and it was a windy day. And so there went the education records. So human error leads to so many of our data breaches, and we need to make sure that we're limiting who has access to data, because if they don't have access to it, then they can't breach it. We need to have guidelines around how that's shared and make sure that they're trained appropriately. Can't tell you how many times we did training on checking who you're sending things to, because that was a big trigger point for us. In fact, 95% of all successful cyber attacks are caused by human error, because we accidentally click on a link because we're too busy to really read, and we're just, getting through those emails. So we click on that link. Now we've given access to stuff. And when I've given access to all of my education records, man, I sure want to make sure that it's only access to the stuff I'm supposed to have access to then, because I'm going to limit the amount of exposure I have there. We as humans make decisions based on knowledge and motivation. Our teachers don't make poor choices about what tools they use because they are secret spies for these organizations that want to come in and steal our data. They're using the best tool that they can find in the moment, and they're using what they think is going to be effective in the classroom, and they don't know any better. It's not malicious. They just don't know better. And so when we train them, when they know better, they do better. And how do we get them to know better? We talk about risk. What could go wrong? What are our long-term effects? What are the short-term effects? How will we handle this when it happens? Man, and you do a tabletop and your administrators sit through what a response would look like to a data breach, and then you start talking about what that impact is, they might be a little bit more motivated to prevent that from happening. I always say never let a good crisis go to waste. When your neighboring district gets breached, make sure you use that to move the needle in your district. Ask, why are we taking this risk? And maybe we have a really good answer. But if we can't articulate, like if we cannot really justify why we're taking the risk, then we need to think about why we're taking it and whether or not that is the right decision for us. When we talk about risk and cybersecurity, we should do it in a way that makes sense to those we already, or to our administrators that already know about risk. We know about risk because we put in access controls. We lock our doors, we secure our walls. I use that same analogy. We would never, ever, ever let a stranger off the street come into our classrooms and interact with our students. We just wouldn't let it happen. We try so hard to prevent it that all of our doors are locked. Most of our classroom doors are locked, if not all of them. We put access card readers so we know who's coming in and out of our building. We have, visitor sign-ins. We're running security checks on everybody. We have locked down who has access to our kids physically. Why wouldn't we do that virtually? Because when somebody is in that building, when we have an intruder physically, we know it almost instantly. When we have a virtual intruder, man, it could be months or years before we know that happened. And what can take place in those environments or information that they can take, those dangers are real. We just need to help make them a little bit more concrete, because cybersecurity really is an abstract concept. We plan already in schools. We have safety plans for everything. You don't have to reinvent the wheel with your cybersecurity plan. Use one of the safety plans that we already have. Your administrators know them. They're comfortable with them. Change that language, turn it into a cybersecurity plan. They're more likely to use something that feels familiar than something that is all new that they have to come up to speed on. And we drill these plans. So why should we treat this one any different? We do fire drills, tornado drills in Tornado Alley. You have earthquake drills, intruder drills. We do all of those already. Let's just add another one. And why do we drill? Let's ask that. Why do we drill those? Okay, then why not drill this one too? And then after we drill, we sit down and we regroup what worked, what didn't work, and we get better. and we focus on our kids. And if we can change the language about cybersecurity to why it's best for our students, man, we win the game then. School safety includes cybersecurity. It shouldn't be separate. The US Department of Ed has those all in one, or at least they did. They may have changed, but I'm pretty sure they have them all under one division, all under one department. My district, we had them all in one umbrella. Safety was safety. That includes cyber and physical. It's a shared responsibility, and your impacts are tremendous. If we start embracing this culture and we get our leadership to invest all in, and it becomes just part of the way we do business, our conversations we have, and we bring all of these back in, and we don't let it, it's not a once a year training. It is something that we're doing all the time. Then we make headway on our culture. So we're going to talk a minute about training because we have to consider what that looks like. We should use humor because our adult learners are different than our students. We don't like to just sit and get. I always tell folks, think about a really ineffective training and then think about a really good one and what made the difference for you. Usually it's engaging, it's relevant to you. You're not just sitting learning in one way the entire time, or it's really short if you are. You're involved, you're interacting with the content, or it's something that you're immediately going to apply and you have a framework to do that. And at some point in it, you get active participation or the ability to give feedback or to get feedback and to process thoughts. We all learn in different styles. I am a type of person that I learn through talking. If anybody knows me, they know that's absolutely 100%. I learn through talking and I learn through reading. I won't remember things that I'm just here unless I repeat it back to you, but I do remember things that I read. That visual piece is important for me, but I don't want to learn through videos. That's just not my style. I will watch a video at 2x speed and then maybe retain a portion of it. My kiddos, my husband, they're video folks. They don't want to read. They want to watch it. That's how they learn. So when we build this program, we have to know that we learn differently. And when we build a training program, an awareness program, we move from training. We're not training you anymore, because in a teacher's mind, training is sitting in a 60-minute session, a PD session. So let's shift that. And instead, let's build an awareness program where we're constantly talking about this. We might send out video shorts. There might be a self-study course. I like weekly emails because we're keeping it top of mind. Even if they don't read them all, they'll read one of them sometime. I take current events and make them into memes because those catch the eye. Usually you can use some humor there. I love Potty PD, Learning in the Loo, the toilet paper, whatever you want to call it. You have a captive audience. Anywhere you have a captive audience, elevators, bathrooms, any place where people are standing and waiting, put posters up, put flyers up, change those out periodically. There is always face-to-face training, but a lot of us just don't have time for that. Do your beginning of the year stuff, but don't let it just be that. And one of my most effective ways of training my teachers is to make it an instructional program for them. They have to teach it to their students. So my digital citizenship curriculum, K through 12, was scaffolded to also include information that I needed my teachers to know. And every certificated staff member had a class that they taught it in. It wasn't just the librarian's responsibility anymore. It was the entire organization teaching these lessons to our students. You know, Data Privacy Week, you turn those into classroom lessons and your teachers learn as well. Train them so well they don't know they're being trained. I learned this kind of the gut punch way, where I had a teacher say that we didn't do training and we were known for our training, but it was because they never saw what we did as training. They knew all of the right answers. They knew how to be compliant with federal law. They knew all of our processes. They were doing the right things. They just never felt like we really trained them on it because it was just the way things were in our district. And probably the most important information or piece of advice I could give you is go slow to go fast. Don't try to tackle everything at once. Don't say we're going to take the hardest thing and do it first. Because not only do you need motivation to keep going, you need to build trust in the organization that cybersecurity is not the enemy. It is not the most inconvenient thing you can do to us to make our lives harder, but instead it is something that we can do and that it is manageable and it will not wreck what we do as business. A lot of times folks feel that cybersecurity is the killer to innovation, and it doesn't have to be. So we're going to do it in small chunks where you can get easy wins at first and you can show folks that it's safe and that it's doable. Find an accountability partner to keep you going, because it is so easy to just, say you're going to do it and then have a million excuses as why work got in the way, because man, the daily grind does get in the way. And then we don't get it done. Schedule it and hold those calendar invites or those calendar appointments sacred. Don't just shift them to the next week. I have a tendency to do that on some of my calendar appointments. Don't do that to your cybersecurity work. Do the work. And if you just do the work in small chunks, the amount of progress you make will absolutely surprise you.
Thank you so much for watching this webinar. We're so excited that Melissa was able to join us and share such wonderful insights. If you'd like to learn more about ClassDojo's privacy and security policies, you can go to classdojo.com/privacy and security. You can also learn more about ClassDojo for districts by going to classdojo.com/districts. You can even book a one-on-one call with our team to learn more. Thanks so much for joining. We hope you enjoyed it. Bye.